Hey, and we're back with another episode, and I'm truly excited to share this week's guest. Well, actually, every week I'm excited, but okay. So, this week's guest is former Prime Minister Eugene Rhuggenaath, and I was very curious about how he transitioned from that post into a new position in the World Bank. I mean, what was that like? Redefining importance, redefining purpose. And as we spoke, I was interested and intrigued by the cultural influence that had from his childhood into the way he was making decisions that were pretty complex, how he processed his mental well-being. It was just such an interesting conversation with full of surprises. But I don't want to let all of it out. I want to leave it for you to listen and let me know what you found fascinating from this conversation. Enjoy this week's episode. Did you ever expect yourself to be where you are?
If you ask me that question now, as of now, I would say yes, because it was a journey getting here. But if I ever expected living in Washington, D.C., working for the World Bank, no, I would never expect that coming from a small island in the Caribbean, and certainly not if you look back at my career and studies. I studied finance, I worked in the international financial services and in the public sector, as you know. But no, making the jump to working on poverty and climate and so on at the World Bank, let's say I'm very appreciative, and now it's making a lot of sense looking back, but not to be expected. No.
It wasn't at all?
No, not at all. Not at all.
So if I had met you when you were 5 years old and told you you're going to do all of this, would you have laughed at me or would you have thought I was being crazy?
You know, that's a very good question, and that is part of my journey and struggle, if I may. If you talk to the 5-year-old in me, a lot of, let's say, limitless dreams. I always felt a sense of purpose in this life, but I've been searching for that purpose for almost all my life, and that has a motivational aspect to it, of course. Ambition and going to study and aiming high, but it also can be frustrating if you feel you're not finding that purpose or not serving that purpose. So, but the 5-year-old would say, yes, I believe that's what I have to do in this world.
Really? Oh, that's wonderful.
Yes.
Was it, I know a lot of people don't understand this, but I would love for you to share your heritage.
Yes.
What is your heritage and why does that really matter?
It does matter. Let me continue with my heritage. Born in Curaçao, as you know, island in the Caribbean, very diverse. I'm second generation, so my parents were both born there. But they are son and daughter of immigrants. So let's say from my father's side, originating from India, via Suriname to Curaçao, and for my mother's side, her father was from Madeira, coming to Curaçao. And that was at the time when the refinery established there by Shell was recruiting people from all parts of the world, which makes Curaçao a bit of a unique place of different religions and cultures from all the continents living together on a small island. And yeah, I think that is helpful for me because I can relate to many cultures. I don't see myself, even though I do identify with where I'm from.
Yeah.
So I'm all of that with pride. And I think in my work right now, where I have to serve different countries, I have to work with colleagues from all continents. There's 25 of us representing 189 countries. I tend to be able to relate very easily with people from different countries, religions, convictions, and colors. So my heritage and where we come from is very relevant and helpful in the work I do now.
So let me ask you this. I have this struggle, but whenever people ask you where you're from, how do you explain it? Do you just say, I'm from Curaçao? Or do you have to explain a lot more behind it?
No, I do explain it because I'm very proud where I am from. And I do explain that I'm Caribbean. I do explain that we are a multicultural society,
Oh, yeah.
which I'm also proud of. But yes, let me say, if it would be maybe in my younger years, let's say being a student or newly professional, yeah, maybe I would have a problem with that. Why? Because you're trying to meet expectations. Let me give an example. I was recently in Brussels in my function representing, let's say, the executive directors representing Europe, and then they addressed us as the European executive directors. And I felt, okay, that sounded a bit strange
Yeah.
because, yes, I am representing the Netherlands and the kingdom, but I'm not particularly European. So at one point, I did explain that I'm a European from the South, maybe. But I've learned in time that no, you don't have to represent something other than you are, or trying to meet some expectations just to be listened to or to be seen or to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
No, I am very keen on representing my unique vantage point and experience in settings like this in the World Bank or in Brussels, to name two examples.
I mean, we come a long way, and time tells us to be comfortable with who we are.
Yes.
Go back in time, growing up in Curacao, was it easy to reconcile that you have different cultures inside of you? What was it like growing up?
I think the culture part was always easy because since school, I mean, you're talking about a 5-year-old or maybe the 10-year-old, I always had friends from different backgrounds, being, let's say, Dutch children from parents that are working for Shell, that living in my neighborhood, or people from the west side, Bandabao as we call it, or Bokasami. I was playing with all kinds of people, and I
Yeah.
actually always enjoyed that. And even was accused by some of them, why do you play with them? Shouldn't you be with us? So
I had that too, yeah.
yeah, so I always enjoyed that. And if you look at my family, we come in all shades of color. So, and my sister is very light skinned. So we have all the spectrum, let's say, ethnicity and race in my own family. So for me, that's a very familiar setting. What was different though is, and that has been also my journey and struggle, is what society imposes on you. For example, being a young man or a boy, that you have to be competitive. And, I did mention the Latin Caribbean culture where,
Yeah.
let me call it, I like calling things by what they are. We do have a tendency to have a machisto kind of culture where you have to live up to certain societal standards with regards to being a man. You have to be tough. You have to have different girlfriends at the same time, and
Was that
certainly
in Curacao?
well, yes, and certain subjects. I mean, you don't talk about. Let me take an easy one. I remember when I was around 15. I was very into, let's say, growing my vegetables and fruit and things. And I spent a lot of time in the garden. And yeah, for my friends and girlfriends, that was quite odd and geeky. Because of those comments, I stopped doing it. That's a simple one.
What was the hardest one, if I may ask?
The hardest one is perhaps in relations to girls or women, or for example, certain things you might not do. I was not a big. I did do martial arts, but I was not a big fighter. There were places next to the airport, let's say, I didn't go to. You know which one I mean?
I do know what you mean.
So I was always struggling with, okay, what I think the society, friends, peers, or family expect of me, and what I felt inside or what I'd rather be doing. For example, I did like reading a lot. I also enjoyed going out and riding a bike and being with my friends, but I also enjoyed being alone and reading and writing stories and things like that. And at one point, as you grow older, you start dropping those activities which might have led you on another journey, maybe, if I can call it that. And the other one within the family, and maybe it's my family, I don't know. I do come with a family with many teachers, and in my family, maybe it's because of the let's say semi-Indian heritage, but education and performance and results and let's say professional accomplishment is very important.
But that means also you put a lot of pressure on yourself.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, because I'm talking looking back, because when you're a child you don't
see it.
You don't see it. But looking back, I realized that to be noted or to be well thought of or spoken to by parents and aunts and uncles, I was putting pressure on myself to perform, to be the best in the class. I was not good in sports at all, so I was in school someone, the last ones that they choose for the teams, and that was quite frustrating looking back, and it makes you compare yourself with others, which is something. It's a trap that I still have in me. I do compare myself with others a bit too much. Yes, fortunately, I'm conscious of it, so I know
not many people
how
are.
to deal with it. But to give one example, when I was studying, I started studying architecture in Miami, and it was quite a tough class to get into, but also to stay in.
Yeah.
And after 3 semesters, I let me put it bluntly, I just gave up. I just went for something easier, which was business school at the time. Well, it was at the time compared to architecture, but I had good grades. But I'm just looking at my neighbors in the studio. I just couldn't keep up in my mind.
Yeah.
Looking at the designs, looking at the very philosophical and poetic way they were describing their projects, I just couldn't do that. So I chose to do something else. The learning lesson for me, when I met my professor a few months after, and he said, "Hey, I haven't seen you anymore. What happened?" I said, "No, I went to business school, and it's costing a lot, these studies, and I have to accomplish something." And he said, "Where are you from? You were from the islands, right?" I said, "Yes." Then he said, "What was your last project?" I said, "It was a museum on the Miami River, something like that." And he asked me, "How many museums have you seen in your life?"
Okay.
And that made me stand still a bit, because he said, your fellow students live in cities like Chicago and New York, and, they have grown up visiting all kinds of museum buildings. How many have you experienced in your life to be able to design one with ease? So I never forgot that conversation. And actually, I noted that.
Why did it make such a difference for you?
Well, because I realized that big part of my decision to stop with that study was I was comparing myself to my peers and not feeling I was performing up to par or was able to. And maybe I wasn't, but it was not a decision that came really from within. It was a decision based on feeling not, let's say, competitive enough, of not living up to a standard that I imposed on myself looking at others.
Okay. Now I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't a choice that I didn't like architecture or was not passionate about it. I'm still passionate about it. But these choices you learn from. I'm not feeling hurtful at all. And sometimes you want to go back, but it leads you to other chapters in your life. And right now, to come back to your first question, where I am, all these chapters add up to the collection of experiences and knowledge that I'm using in my work. So looking back, I don't feel, let's say, disappointed in myself. but this comparing to others or trying to live up to other people's expectation, it's something that I still maybe in my subconscious and sometimes conscious wrestle with. And I do see this in others, for example, my children, and I do try to share my experience with them. I mean, I was even a dropout at the moment.
No way, you too?
Oh yes, I
You have
was.
like a lot of bags coming out of prizes here.
At that moment, I told a few friends, I don't know the purpose in life. I don't know what I'm doing in business school. Maybe I should become a fisherman or something like that. And that put me in a downward spiral that I dropped out of school, and I was, I don't know, but I might have been even semi-depressive. I did go back. I did a summer school. I did great. It was interesting. It was macroeconomics. And then a friend of mine, and that is one advice I could share, don't keep it for yourself, talk to others.
Is it that's what helped you get back into school?
Yes, that helped. I mean, and again, going back to what we were discussing before.
Yeah.
I mean, a guy from Curaçao talking to other people about frustrations and depression and emotions is not something you do, right? But I was in a bit of a hole. So fortunately, I did have friends with me and we talked, and one of them said, well, how much you still need to do to finish and graduate? And then I said, I never thought about that. So I went and I had to do something like 3 semesters or something like that. So the finish line was quite close.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I said, okay, let me just finish it. And when I got back and I got motivated again, I was interested again in let's say the school subjects, and I did finish, and that led then to my next step or next chapter, which was working for an international financial services company in Curaçao that's global.
At that point, did you still ever think you were going to become prime minister or work?
No.
Just,
never.
Because, when you're talking about comparison, when I meet some individuals, they know their career. They're like, I'm going to become this civil servant. This. You're saying, well, I just dropped out. I compare myself to others. But then you go, well, you went.
Yeah,
So what was it? What
it is a very important question you were asking. And for me, did I know I would be Prime Minister of Curaçao? No. Did I plan it? No. Did I have that ambition? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So it wasn't planned. And that was part of my long frustration, let's say career-wise. And maybe it goes back to that expectations from my youth, and you have to become something, and you have to be best in your class.
It was still driving you.
It was still driving, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, really. And I saw my fellow students, one of them, and I did express that I was a bit jealous of him at the time, recently. We started architecture at the same time, and he's now a very well-known Curaçao architect, and he does beautiful work.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm a bit jealous of you. You did it. So, and another friend of mine knew exactly what he wanted to do, biochemistry. Then he went and, he's doing DNA research. Now he's working for an international biomedical company. And I have no idea what I'm doing. So I went, step by step, and coming back to becoming Prime Minister was also, I was working at a good job at that company. I mentioned the International Financial Services. I had a young family. We were living comfortable life. I could pay for everything. And then I was asked to come back to politics. And then I said, at that point I was feeling I was missing something. And in fact, that was just after I applied for the World Bank for the first time. 2015. Yeah. After some searching, I thought, if I still wanted to do something for the public good, while being in a banking environment, that was the World Bank. And so I applied. I didn't get it, but after that, I was asked to become Minister of Economic Development for 1 year.
Yeah.
without knowing what happens next. So I was in fact hoping my wife would not agree with it, maybe, but she
Did
did.
she agree with
And
it?
she did. And then I said, this is not a leap of faith, but it was a leap. And it was a leap of faith for me because I said, I don't know what comes after.
Because
There's an election coming. I could not go back to my job. That was clear.
Well, did you know that after 1 year, it's going to be hard to go back to that job you had?
No, I know it was going to be hard to go back to that job after politics. And that has to do with being a politically exposed person and being a bank director. That does not go together. So they told me that it will be difficult for you to come back. So I really stepped in the unknown. And after a year, there was an election, and then the government fell. There was another election. And at that moment, I was party leader, and eventually we won, and I became prime minister. Was that planned? No.
Well,
was that meant to be in a way? Looking back, I think yes. That's why I say, I don't have a straight line, life or career, but every chapter gave me new lessons, and that I still use today. I'm proud to have served in that capacity in very difficult moments for my country. I'm still processing whether or not I'm satisfied with what I've done, but at least I know I did the best I could. And politics was not my ambition, but serving and thinking about how to build a country, how to, let's say, help the most vulnerable, how to create perspective for future generations. That led me into a political party to think about those things. But no, I would never had the ambition to serve as a politician. I'm not.
I'm going to be a bit tongue-in-cheek and tell you that was the longest training you ever had to get to the first job you applied to. Because you applied to the World Bank. You didn't get it. So you had to do a lot of training as a prime minister to now get the job that you first asked for.
Yeah, and even when I stepped down, it took me 2 years to get that job. In fact, I gave up. I mean, I was looking for a job and
you gave up?
I was not able to get a job and talking about the personal journey, feeling quite...
Was that hard?
Quite rejected and unappreciated and not valued, which...
Was that the 2 years, right? So between and stepping down.
That was the 2 years. But, sometimes it takes 2 years. Maybe I had to process some things in my own life. There was some things in my family with regards to my mother that I needed to handle with my sister. But I think I needed to discover myself again. And that takes time.
Because you go from here, from being somebody to being nobody.
Well, depends how you see it, because that's a very good one.
Tell me.
The first time I was in government, I was Commissioner of Finance, and there was a colleague there who's minister now, actually. Yeah. He told me, I have to share with you, prepare you, because now you're somebody, and then when the government falls or something happens, you go back to being nobody in a day. And he shared how he experienced that. And I do know what he means. He means, everybody around you looks at you, okay, you're a politician, you're a well-known person, people change around you, right? The way they
change according to your title.
And when you're out, you're out. But I told him, and thankfully at that moment, I said, I was somebody before I came Commissioner of Finance, and I'm going to be somebody the day after. So that was not the issue for me. The issue was more, what's next? What do you do after you're prime minister? How do you continue? And that was my desire, serving community, working on, poverty and climate, economic development, energy, all these things, because I'm still an expert of nothing. But I do have a lot of experience and thoughts and vision about all these topics. But the thing is, in that journey and wrestling with expectations and things you impose on yourself, it was quite frustrating, traveling to Europe, back, doing interviews, calling people, and and trying to get a job eventually to provide for your family, and then not able to reach that goal, but also feeling, okay, don't I have value anymore because I was prime minister, or because I'm a politician, or because I don't have 20 years experience working in some sector like energy or climate. And that was quite frustrating, because you then start talking with yourself in a negative way. Thankfully, I can share with you that I did have coaching at one moment as well. That opened the door for me to realizing what we were talking about, what conditioning can do for you.
I was going to ask, so how did you have like a sort of an identity crisis, and did a lot of deconditioning have to happen?
Yes, I did have to go back to myself.
What does that mean for you?
It meant for me recognizing and talking to that 5-year-old boy. That's why that's why I started laughing when you asked that question. Ooh. What were my dreams? What were my ambitions? What gives me satisfaction and purpose in life? What do I do well and like doing? And and in that 5 years, for example, I spoke to students, and I spoke to different peoples. I connected back with people, and I realized I have to be among people. I went to work in a flexi work space in Rotterdam called the Triangle, because I needed to be around people. Working at home doesn't work with me. I realized that I like speaking to people and inspiring them or helping them. And at one point that came together, that I, let's say, peeled all the conditioning and the expectations that I was imposing on myself and not others. And also learning, and this was the coaching part, learning about your defense mechanism. For example, suppressing emotions or reacting defensively when you don't feel valued or even seen or loved unconditionally. Trying to meet expectations that don't align with who you are, really. Let me go on a tangent and come back.
Okay.
I'm talking about the society we live in. And for example, if I was 20 years old and somebody tells you, any man really, but tells you, hey, you have to be more balanced and get in touch with your feminine side.
Feminine.
That's something you don't you don't want to hear. Feminine side, what is that? But I learned that I am a balanced human being. I learned that I am able to talk about my emotions without feeling I'm less male or less, less myself. And I noted that I had a lot of suppressed emotions. And being prime minister in the period, it was the pandemic. The pandemic for a greater part. I did know and carry the responsibility, but I suppressed myself. Even so far, I don't want to blame it on it, but I became quite sick, ill, and I didn't pay attention to my health at all, to my family relationship with my sons, because I was focused on task, right?
During pandemic, could you even it was just so much going on.
Yeah.
So isn't it logical to some degree that because you had the position you did, that you held on till you could?
Yes, it is. Because, it was crisis. We were working almost 24/7, but I did learn that, there's an inspiring quote that I always use of Mahatma Gandhi, which is one of my inspirations, that says you have to lose yourself in the service of others. And that means that you don't have to think about yourself. You have to think about others and serving them. But the interpretation of losing yourself and not paying attention to yourself, not caring for yourself because you're fully dedicated to the service of others, which I was, that doesn't help serving others, because you are not balanced, you may become irritable, you will lose yourself and lose who you are in serving others. So going back to what we were discussing, I had to take time to come back to myself and embracing who I am, getting in touch with that 5-year-old that doesn't think in limitations and had these dreams and thought that Papiamento can become the world language, to name one example. And to be honest, at the point, I gave up at one point. I said, I'm not applying for jobs anymore. People don't seem to be, let's say, interested or don't see use for me in their organization, whatever it may be. I'm just going to be a consultant and take it from there. And then came this position. And when I applied, I said, I'm going to write why. And I went in the interview completely myself. I didn't go to please anybody. I didn't go to make an impression. And I said, even things that I thought I didn't have at the moment, because I have to represent 13 countries, including many countries in Eastern Europe I never visited. But I said, for me, that's a learning experience. So
I'm curious, what did you write in your why?
Well, and my why is my purpose that I see for myself in life. I want to make a difference in people's life. I want to help the most vulnerable and all these themes. But I did also share where I come from, what I've worked on as minister. I did address many of the themes that we need to deal with at the bank. I do have banking experience as well.
Yeah.
And actually, that I think was the differentiating factor with other top candidates. There were many other candidates. That I do come from an island. So I do know what climate change means in a small island development state context. And I had banking experience and political governance experience, because the people I have to talk to in my job in representing these countries are prime ministers and ministers of finance. So if before maybe my CV and my career path seems, let's say, strange or illogical to some, actually, it made a difference in this case.
So it makes total sense for this job.
Yeah, but most importantly is the way I went into that interview, and this was because of this self-rediscovery and the coaching that I had, and accepting myself who I am. I was very, very calm and very sure of myself, and not trying to make an impression or trying to be something I'm not. And I think that for me, it made a difference in being where I am now.
So do you feel that I spoke to a guest the other couple of weeks ago, and he dropped a big bomb. He said 50% of the male gender actually have go for suicide. I thought that is a huge number. Beyond scope, it just hit me that I'm like, how is that possible? Because in my head, I see a lot of mental health. There's a lot of discussions. And I just thought, but to still have the word 50% is really high.
What the root cause for that is, but if I look at myself and how I grew up in a very rational thinking environment. Certainly, if you're talking about men, in my family, for example, talking about emotions is not something you did. I mean, the famous "men don't cry" really was the mantra, right?
Really?
Men don't cry. If you cry because you're afraid of jumping in the water, or you're feeling you're laughed at. So that is one. The other one, although I did have loving and caring parents, but expression of love we didn't have. So, for example, one day it was Father's Day, and for some reason I was not with my father that morning, but we met at our grandparents' home. And my uncle said, "Hey, aren't you giving your father a hug?" Giving my father a hug? What is that? I've never.
It's very weird for you?
It was very weird. And even saying, I love you, even though I know my father loved me deeply, but no, that's not a word that we use in our family growing up. So, yeah, talking about emotions, expressing emotions, and daring to not fit the standards of society from what a male has to be, or a father has to be, or a male leader has to be.
Yeah.
Because that's something that I got a lot of criticism with how I led when I was a prime minister. Because our image is you have to be the leader that, knocks his fist on the tables and throws people on a bus. I don't believe in that. I believe in servant leadership.
Isn't that a bit aggressive in some ways, though?
Yes, a bit. And so I can imagine that someone living in those circumstances that has no way to express or even accept their real selves if they are different can lead to taking the step to commit suicide. And I think we don't speak enough of how male persons as human beings have to deal with themselves in society, maybe. I'm just guessing now, but I'm just reflecting on how I experienced life in our community and my family as a male.
Yeah.
That in extreme circumstances can lead to suicidal inclinations.
I'm thinking about the word vulnerable. You mentioned the word,
Yeah.
which I'm always amused by it, which is, we say, okay, emotions equals feminine, right? And then you have leaders equals masculine. And then,
Yes.
and so you listen to these words and then you go, but what is it really? What is vulnerability if I removed femininity and masculinity from the equation?
Yeah.
So what
And,
is it?
and especially in our normal thinking, vulnerability does not equal strength.
Yeah, it doesn't. What do you define it?
You're in control.
Yeah.
You don't show emotions. Man, don't cry. And you certainly don't talk about your emotions or express fear. Let me share something with you. I have a fear of public speaking. Every time I have to step on a stage.
No, hold on. Wait. I know I'm talking to you who gives lots of speeches. Yes. You have fear of public speaking.
I have fear of public speaking. I couldn't give a speech in my own classroom when I was studying abroad with the same people, 30 people. I was the whole school year. And until now, and even before this conversation, my stomach was turning. But coming back to your point, I mean, typically a male person or any person in leadership position is not expected to talk about their fears or their emotions or their insecurities or doubts. Whereas if you think about what really connects people, what really inspires nowadays, certainly this younger generation, what really can make a difference between war and peace, or conflict, what really can, in my case, I had to manage a coalition government. Our objective was to have a stable government for 4 years.
Yeah.
You cannot do that with macho politics and not being vulnerable and not being empathic towards others and not putting yourself in the second place. So vulnerability for me is strength. It's not weakness. Okay. Vulnerability makes you closer to yourself. Vulnerability, for me, makes you being more able to not only connect with others, but inspire others and coach others and motivate others and move people and keep people together. You cannot do that only by force or being this, let's say, robotic image of what people expect a leader to be. And look at, for example, meeting the Prime Minister of New Zealand at the time. Remember when they had that shooting in a mosque. It was horrible, horrible. But she was a mother. She had a child being a prime minister, first of all.
Yeah.
And at that moment, she showed emotion. She showed care, understanding. And that's the kind of leadership we need in the world today. And when I met her, I was so privileged. And I said to her, I admire the way you do your job. And I was prime minister as well at the time.
Yeah.
But she's a woman. And people would say, yes, of course, because she's a woman. And no, she's a leader. And a man can also be vulnerable, can also express emotions, and certainly emotions that is constructive and helps others and helps us connect as human beings.
Yeah.
To address the problems that we have in the world today. I mean, we cannot do that with being forceful and command and control type leadership. But I'm going too far. But I've learned in this 2 years, and maybe even before that, to be comfortable talking about my vulnerabilities and my fears and how I deal with them.
Yeah.
That's only made me grow. And I don't know where my journey is leading after this, but I'm sure that I'll be taking this with me.
So which speech? I mean, you went through COVID. COVID was definitely a very vulnerable time for everybody.
Yeah.
Which speech did it ever make it so aware for you that you said, and it's all about vulnerability? Was there ever one speech you gave and you felt proud because it showed the most human possible?
Yes. That was when I was just prime minister in a few months. And I was invited to speak at the Pride Parade or celebration in Curaçao, in downtown Curaçao. And for me, it was, first of all, I was invited, so I said yes. Secondly, I had my own personal journey with accepting, let's say, sexual diversity, LGBTQ. I don't like using acronyms to describe people, but let's say sexual minorities in the community, people of different sexual orientations, is not something we grew up with. And I wasn't homophobic, but I was not comfortable for some reason being among gay persons, for example, when we went out dancing.
Okay.
But fortunately for me, and that is how life helps you, I went for vacation to the Netherlands and I was invited to a party. And my friend told me, I have to warn you, it's a gay person, so it will be very gay.
Yeah.
And I tell you, I went there, I spoke to people, I enjoyed, I was like, wow, I never thought that I'd be, one, comfortable, but also liking people of other sexual orientation, in this case, homosexual. And that started a journey for me. That at one point, even my sister, I don't think she mind me talking about her, came to me and shared with me that she is homosexual. And thankful for my journey, I was able to embrace her and show her my love.
Yeah.
And in fact, even my father, who's a Christian semi-preacher, wrote a very nice message to her. It's about love. And so thankful for those experiences, coming back to that invitation. Everybody around me tell me, Prime Minister cannot go there. You cannot speak at that event. I was literally killed in media. And people that wanted well for me also told me, listen, don't do that. And I was like, why not?
Exactly.
I have a message.
Yeah.
And my message was about the equal right to happiness. And I did use the U.S. Declaration of Independence in my speech.
Well, to me, at least, it makes sense.
Yes, it's about human rights. It's about acceptance. It's about equality and love. Mm-hmm. And let's be honest, in our country, even though we are more tolerant than it seems to people of different sexual orientation, but we do have a discrimination in the law that these persons are not able to, let's say, attain the ultimate expression of love as a couple of getting married. Before I went, I talked to even a Catholic priest. I said,
how did
what
that
do
go?
you think? What do you think about this? And
Yeah.
he told me, he gave me the right cue. And that was actually the opening of my speech. He said, you are the prime minister for everyone. And I said, yes, I am.
Yeah.
So I went there, I gave the speech, I talked about the right to pursue happiness that we all have. I talked about human rights. I talked about recognizing people and loving each other. And I tell you, I can still feel it. The feeling of joy and jubilation after that, the embrace, that made it the most important speech I ever did. I didn't know that it would be that important. It even got attention in the international press. And it's still one of my proudest moments because I stood for my convictions.
Yeah.
And I was myself, and I fully embraced the people that have another lifestyle than I, but they're part of our community and they should feel welcome in Curaçao. And in fact, talking about Curaçao, that is what Curaçao is. We were always welcoming to people of different ethnicities, different religions, different continents, and yes, also different sexual orientations. So I was not, as Prime Minister, speaking, let's say, outside the values and the spirit of Curaçao. I was embracing that. And maybe we're all not ready for that. But that moment, I certainly felt that I did the right thing, not only as me, Eugene, but as the Prime Minister of the country.
Were you surprised, as I was, that he wasn't really ambitious to become the Prime Minister, but life led him to that way? What I found so interesting was that he was getting prepared every single time for the next step. And I have this question for you. What are you resisting to do? What are you resisting to do or holding yourself back because there's uncertainty, because you don't have that plan ahead? And what could you do just one step differently to see where it will take you to that next step? And if you did find this week's episode useful, do share it out with somebody who could really benefit from this. You never know. Just one conversation can make all the difference. And if you want to be notified, be sure that you have followed and subscribed. It also helps us know if we are on the right track and giving you the content that you want to hear. Hey, thanks for listening. Until the next one.